You would think that you had a victory
Oh,
there when you
bro.
saw the
No,
11
I
to
don't
1.
think that I have a victory at all. I'm not looking. No, no, no.
Hetero
I'm
to
not looking
homo,
at
11
this.
to 1.
I'm
Yay,
not.
we win.
No, so I'm not
No,
looking at this
11
as
to
a
what?
victory or anything like this.
Here's what the
My
proportionality
goal
should be.
here, my goal
Here's
here
what.
is to
But
show
let me.
how dishonest you are.
You
Again,
didn't.
I want
You failed.
to. I want to show
You
that,
failed miserably.
as I said before, you're missing the forest from the tree. For the
No,
trees,
you're
right?
missing the
Is
forest for
that
the trees because you're ignoring
you?
proportionality.
I'm
This
not.
this
I'm
survey
not.
did
So
not ignore proportionality, and
I
that's why you
agree.
can't stand it. That's why
No,
you
no,
want to
no.
hone on the last
It's not
sentence
that
where it said, "This doesn't mean that if you're gay, you're a pedophile." Yes,
But
we're all saying that. We're all
no, you're
saying
not.
that.
No, but
We're all
again,
saying that. No
in the
one is saying
context
anything
here,
otherwise. All right. If you
in the
want to prop that
context
up
here,
as your
in the
straw man, go
context
right
here,
ahead.
in the
All we're
context
saying,
here,
all
in the
we're saying is
context
that the
here, in the
proportion
context here, in
is
the
over. There's an
context here, in the
overrepresentation.
context
That's all
here,
we're saying.
in the context here. Again, if you're having the discussion, right, which we are supposed to be having, the context of the discussion, which is are gay men more likely to sexually abuse children? You have not demonstrated that. Instead,
Studies have.
actually they haven't.
The studies have. 11 to 1. What? Let me ask you
that's
this: what
heterosexual to
should be the
homosexual.
ratio? All right. So
I don't
if
know what
all right,
should be
if
the
you have,
ratio.
if you have, let's take African Americans for example.
No,
African
so I think
Americans
we're
make
done
up
here because
15% of the
you're no
population.
longer
Correct?
like you're. I don't care. Like that
Okay.
doesn't
You
have
don't care about
anything.
statistics. You don't
That
care
doesn't
about
have
numbers
anything to do
because
with the
you're a
actual
liberal.
discussion here.
That's why.
Sure. So
So in the world
that's the
where
end of here.
facts matter, in the world where facts matter, we care about these numbers. We study them.
You
We
don't.
use them to
You
better
don't.
our world.
You
We don't
completely
ignore them
ignored
because they
the
say
actual
things that we
studies
don't
that you
like to
tried to
hear.
cite. Is going to be are gay men more likely to sexually abuse children? The format essentially will be about 7-8 minutes, maybe a little longer, for Jill to give his opening statement, and then for me to give my opening statement. And then we'll just go into a sort of free for all opening discussion. And
All right,
the
sounds good.
stream, hang on. So, and the stream probably is going to last for about an hour, maybe a little more, but go till 9.
And then it will last about a week on your channel before YouTube, the algorithms catch up with you. This is not a discussion that wants to be had.
Is this part of your opening statement, or are you just
Oh,
ranting now?
yeah, I'm just
Ranting?
ranting. Yeah.
So you want to just go into your opening statement then?
Oh, sure. Let me share my screen. Just wanted to say while I'm pulling up my slides here, it's difficult to show or the dark side, or to expose the dark side of the homosexual culture without appearing to be mean or a bigot or harsh or a Christian. But it's time, I think, that we acknowledge this problem and how it threatens the Western, or our foundation of Western civilization, or the nuclear family.
Sure. Your opening statement should be able to demonstrate that.
Okay.
So
Give me 1 second
hurry
here.
up. Wait, you haven't pulled it up on that time you were rambling?
Okay. All right. So so I don't I'm not saying these things to be mean or to be harmful or hurtful to anyone, but just to express the concern that many have been having for decades now, since this behavior has been normalized or in the culture. Most liberals, homosexual activists, they publicly deny that they want access to children, but they seem to be working hard at legitimizing pedophilia or sex with children, underage children. Their cause has been aided by professional, psychological, and psychiatric associations, which have moved towards normalizing child sex. Government, mainstream media, of course, overwhelmingly supports this movement. However, the overwhelming evidence, the facts, support the belief that this is it's a deviant behavior, and it's often accompanied by disorders that have dire consequences for our culture or Judeo-Christian cultures and values. So research confirms that homosexuals molest children at a rate vastly higher than heterosexuals. And what we mean by rate is proportionally, not sheer number. There are more heterosexuals than homosexuals. So we would expect there to be more homosexual child molesters. So the mainstream homosexual culture commonly promotes sex with children. You, you've all seen the drag queen hour specials, the adult entertainment. That is adult entertainment for children. So blind surveys or surveys that are done without the participant knowing who the surveyor is, they reveal. Therefore, they're more trustworthy because that sort of prevents bias. Statisticians have found blind surveys are the best. They reveal a shockingly high number of homosexuals admit to sexual contact with minors. Also, homosexual activist groups around the world, not just in the United States, are looking to lower or even abolish age of consent laws in order to, quote unquote, liberate children from the constraints of a patriarchal society. So I went through some of these studies, and here's what they've revealed. By the way, Miss Griner will be, I hear, playing for Team Russia this summer in the Olympics. She'll probably will be playing for Team Russia for about 2 more years until a real president comes back into power. This study was done on the homosexual molestation of children and interaction of teachers and students or pupils. And found that those who practice homosexual acts are at least 12 times more likely, more apt to molest a child sexually. With suitable corrections for bisexuals, probably at least 16 times more apt to molest children. Now, that's not to say that every homosexual is a child molester. Just like when you hear statistics about Black violence or criminality, the 15/52, which is some sort of supposed to be some sort of white supremacist symbol, or you might see 15/50. That's not to say that the entire 15% is committing the crimes. The truth of the matter is, a small percentage of the 15% are committing the crimes. Most Black people, like myself and Carlton, are decent people. So the same can be said of the homosexual community, that the percentage that are of the community or of our country, which is a very small percentage, of that very small percentage, there are a small percentage of people that are committing these acts. Okay. But it's still, that being said, it's still something that needs to be addressed, the alarming overrepresentation of pedophiles who are homosexual. That cannot be ignored. Teachers who practice homosexual acts are between 90 to 100 times more apt to involve themselves sexually with pupils than heterosexual teachers. What we didn't like that statistic. These findings suggest this is a study that was also done by the same researcher, molestations by homosexual foster parents. These findings suggest that the proportion, okay, Proportionality is going to come up, I'm sure. The proportion of homosexual perpetrators in a systematic tally of newspaper stories is similar to the proportion in data sets from large entities, and put in question the current policy of utilizing homosexuals as foster parents. I agree wholeheartedly with that conclusion. There's another study that was done using, now, this is just a word that, just a fancy word for using a test. I'm trying to be PG here, but that word phallometric just simply means test that will test your arousal, how aroused you get. They calculated the proportion of true pedophiles among a various group of sex offenders against children. The ratio of homosexual or heterosexual to homosexual pedophiles was calculated to be approximately 11.1. So during these tests, I'm assuming they would show pictures, and based on the amount of arousal, they would determine whether or not this person is being aroused by homosexual acts or homosexual pictures. So this suggests that the resulting proportion of true pedophiles among persons with a homosexual erotic development is greater than that in persons who develop heterosexually. All right, so there are a number of studies we can go through. I'm only going to just cite a few. Here's another. This one was done, looks like, by the same researcher: pedophilia and heterosexuality versus homosexuality, where the sex offenders were researched, and it was found there's a large difference between the proportion of prevalences of heterosexual versus homosexual offenders against children. On the one hand, the proportional prevalences of, and again, genophilia is just means those who are attracted to women, and versus those who are attracted to men. This difference suggests that the development of erotically preferred partner sex and partner age are not independent of each other, and that in pedophilia, the development of heterosexual or heterosexuality, and or homosexuality is brought about by factors different from those operative in the development of, again, attraction to men or attraction to women. The statistics are alarming. We again, we know that there has been a destructive impact on homosexuality upon our civilization. Even some conservative, unfortunately, publications choose to ignore this issue, instead have published articles arguing for tolerance of the gay lifestyle. But the numbers say otherwise. There is nothing healthy, normal, or natural about this behavior. If we live and let live, if we have that attitude, the homosexual agenda would have overcome or overtaken our culture. And if our culture is to survive, we need to be honest about the numbers, about the statistics. And I'll yield there.
All right. There you go. Again, thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate you guys waking up this early to listen to us to ramble about something that's already been settled. So, with more and more anti gay activists like Jill currently ramping up their rhetoric, long debunked myths concerning gay folk are once again being treated as though they are actual fact. Let me be clear. There is no scientific basis for asserting that gay men are more likely than heterosexual men to sexually abuse children. In fact, according to the seminal 1978 study from doctors Nicholas Groth and Jean Brenbaum, the adult heterosexual male constitutes a greater risk to the underage child than does the adult homosexual male. Now, jumping off that study, and again, these links are in the description of this particular stream, so people can check me and keep me honest in regards to this. Now, jumping off that study, that 1978 study, it would help to first clarify some things, right? Actual experts who have studied or continue to look into this separate adult sexual orientation, that being heterosexual and homosexual, etc., and sexual attraction to children. Now, speaking exclusively to that attraction towards children, this same study divides child sex offenders into two groups: fixated offenders, which are those who typically have an obsession with children and are usually described as Peter Pan like in their behavior or their identity. Now, researchers tend to say that when it comes to these sorts of adults, or these offenders, excuse me, they find adults sexually repulsive and cannot be considered either homosexual or heterosexual. Now, the second type of offender is what's referred to as a regressed offender. Now, these offenders are those who have a temporary or opportunistic attraction to children. So let's focus mostly on those regressed offenders because that's what's more applicable to this particular conversation. Their abuse of children, the regressed offenders, their abuse of children often occurs because they're experiencing stressful situations, right? That cause them to quote unquote regress. An even more frightening aspect to these offenders is that they are typically heterosexual in their adult relationships. They're often married, their parents, their step parents, and our extended family, people that the child would generally be familiar with. Which is further, now all of this information is further corroborated by both the Are Children at Risk for Sexual Abuse by Homosexuals 1994 study and the Abel and Harlow child molestation prevention study from 2001. Now, that 1994 study, the Are Children at Risk, that study states that 82% of the offenders they identified were heterosexual. 82%. The 2001 study, the Abel and Harlow study, is a bit more conservative with a number of 70% of its offenders being heterosexual. In both these studies, these men are mostly white, married, working class with a bit of college education, and religious. Why don't Jill and other anti gay activists focus on those attributes? Especially when the 2001 study, that again, the Abel and Harlow study, states that 93% of its offenders were religious. Using the logic that anti gay activists like Jill are attempting to employ, isn't it more accurate to say that religious heterosexuals are more likely to sexually abuse children? Especially if you take into account the religious landscape study that was done by Pew Research, which says that 70% of Americans identify as some form of Christian. I'm not a math bitch, but couldn't that mean that a significant number, even more so, of these 93% of offenders that are religious, maybe Christian? Again, Jill and other anti gay activists aren't going to look at things in that way either. It's very interesting. Now, I want to be clear even more so that none of these framings that I've proposed or that even Jill is proposing help us in isolating the actual issue here, the abuse. Anti gay activists like Jill are actively muddying the waters by espousing their own biases, as you even saw in his opening statement. And this has done nothing for the victims of sexual abuse. researchers will more often speak of having a proactive approach to this particular issue rather than the reactive approach that you saw with Jill. These solutions, when it comes to that proactive approach, are often requiring us to speak to our children, to create spaces that are judgmentless and being vigilant or mindful, right? Making sure that we're seeing the signs of sexual abuse and hopefully preventing that. As the Zero Abuse Project states, the prevention focus is on behavior and not relationship. But if we're going to take the approach Jill and other anti gay activists take, the facts don't lie. An overwhelming number of child sexual abusers are married, heterosexual men that have close relations to their victims. I'll end with this quote from the abstract of another 1978 study called Homosexual Behavior and Child Molestation, a Review of the Evidence. Quote, thus it seems counterproductive to study attacks on children as a variation of homosexuality. Instead, it would help solve the problem if more research were devoted to the types of children most likely to become victims, the circumstances under which molestation occurs, and warning signals that others can interpret to possibly prevent molestation. And that's the end of my opening statement.
Yeah, yeah, that I cited from that same study. So yeah, I did read that. Yeah, that would be a great idea for the sake of the children, to concentrate more on the child, circumstances of abuse and things like that. That's the same. That's the same study that you're citing that concluded that the ratio is 11-1 of heterosexual versus pedophiles, or
Actually,
heterosexual to homosexual
so
pedophiles.
that's an entirely different study that you're talking about. That was
Mm.
not the one I ended the citation with.
The proportions of heterosexual and homosexual pedophiles among sex offenders against children.
That's not the one that I cited at the
Oh,
end
okay,
there.
is another one. Okay, I might have read that one, but yeah, I do agree wholeheartedly. But I wanted to, and I predicted this would be the case. Proportionality would come up, would come into play, or be ignored, or maybe not understood by my opponent, who already admitted he's not really good at math, right? But well, here you have a math teacher that can help, all right? So when you're citing the '94 study, and
Mhm.
these studies are worthless if they're not going to deal with proportionality. Okay, when you cite a study that says 82% of the child molesters are
Mhm.
heterosexual,
Mhm.
okay, that does nothing to move the proverbial ball forward, because there are more heterosexuals than homosexuals. So we would
So,
expect most of the offenders to be hetero. Okay, so what we want to look at is the proportionality.
proportion.
So telling me that 82% were hetero or 70% were hetero
Mhm.
does nothing to prove that this isn't a problem within the homosexual community.
But it doesn't
For
prove that it's a problem within the homosexual community, even going by the logic you just spouted there, right? So
Well, it does prove that
it
there
sounds
is.
like you want to have your cake and eat it too, right? So you seem to be ignoring the fact of like, well, these numbers obviously overwhelmingly show heterosexual, but you're
Not
trying to find it.
proportionality.
You're trying to find an excuse by using the proportionality by saying, well, yeah, it shows that 82% are heterosexual,
Mhm.
but
Right.
this
You want
other number is the homosexual, so maybe it's more homosexual in that case. So therefore, bing bang boom, I
no,
win.
no,
Nah,
no, no.
that's not how that
You're
works.
missing the point. Do you understand what proportionality is?
Yeah,
Do
sure.
you
Yeah.
understand? Okay.
Meaning that
So
it's
let me give a
indicative of the general society. That's what you're trying to say, right?
no, no,
General
no, no.
population.
No, you're
Proportional
missing
to
the
the
point.
population?
Well, it's a survey, it's a study, it's the sample size. Okay.
Wait, it's is
Um,
it a survey or a study? Those are two different
Same thing. The
things.
survey is done before the
Mm,
study. Okay. So
oh, okay,
here's what the problem is.
sure.
We want the true proportion. We want
True
the
proportion.
proportion of true pedophiles among persons with a homosexual uh, or homosexual erotic development, rather as opposed to heterosexual. We want proportions. We just don't want sheer numbers.
What's
Okay.
true? Could you
Okay.
define
So
for me?
that's
Hang on, hang
yeah.
on. Could you define for me true pedophile? What do you mean by that?
Meaning the true proportional relationship. For example,
No, no,
if
no, no,
you
no, no.
had
no.
50,
Hang
let
on,
me
hang
give you
on,
an
hang
example.
on, hang on, hang on, hang on, hang on. I asked you a specific question. You said
Yes.
true pedophile. Could
The
you
true
define for me
proportion.
what you? No, you said
We
true
want, okay, I
pedophile though.
misspoke. I
So
meant
could
to
you
say the
define?
true proportionality. Okay, let me give you a simple example that I
Okay.
use in my classrooms. Okay, and so
Okay.
that you can understand. So just giving me the percentage of how many whites commit crime, or not percentages, but the sheer number of how many whites commit crimes
Mhm.
is misleading. It's
How?
dishonest
How?
because the proportionality matters. Okay. If you have 50, let's say you had 50 black offenders. All right. Let's just take
Wait, why don't you
how
just
almost, all right.
use?
We'll,
Why
we'll
don't you
use, we'll
just
stay within,
use? Yeah,
okay. We'll
stay
stay within the
within the.
topic.
Yeah.
Let's say
Yeah.
you had 50 offenders who were homosexual.
Okay.
Okay. Out of the total of 10,000, right?
Okay.
So 50 offenders,
So there's 10,000 offenders. Out of
there's
the 10,000,
10,000, there's,
50 are
well,
homosexual
hold on. There's 10,000
offenders.
hetero, no, listen carefully. All right.
Well, you're
Let the
the way
teacher
you're
teach.
word. Wait,
Let the
hang
teacher
on, hang
teach.
on. The reason I
All right.
keep bringing this up is
Here, let
because
me pull up a
the way
graphic
you're
for you.
wording it, the way that you're wording it
Yeah.
is
Let me,
incredibly confusing
okay. Listen,
because you
you keep
seem to
cutting me
be
off. You're not letting me speak.
well because
You have
it's not
50
you're not
offenders.
clear.
Okay. All right. Pay attention. I'm trying to
I'm paying
educate you.
attention. You're just
All
not
right.
clear. You
Okay.
got to be
That's fine.
clearer in your
All right.
speech.
All right. Just listen. All right. You have 50 offenders of the
Total.
heterosexual, 50 offenders of the heterosexual or origin or whatever, or you might say it's a orientation, out of a total of 10,000 heterosexuals. Okay,
So,
so our
wait, hang
fraction,
on. So it's 50 heterosexual out of
here.
10,000 heterosexual? Do you
I'm
mean
just
50
I'm just giving
homosexual?
you numbers to help you with the
This is
concept of
weird. Okay. Okay.
proportionality, because you
Okay.
seem to have trouble with the unit rate or any type of proportional
No, it's
relationship,
not that. I'm
because
just
you're
confused
citing
by the way you're
statistics
doing
that are
this.
just giving sheer numbers, which is dishonest, because
It's
there are
not, but
more
okay.
heterosexuals than homosexuals. So we would
Okay.
expect there to be a larger percentage of the cases to be heterosexual um, offenders, right? So I'm
Okay.
trying to give you this proportional relationship so that you can understand where
Okay.
the argument lies. Because if
Okay.
you're arguing just sheer number or percentage, you're not dealing with the argument. You're propping up a straw man just to knock it down.
It's
Okay.
not, but
So
okay.
there are 50 offenders that are heterosexual
Okay.
out of 10,000, right?
Out of
Now,
10,000
out of
heterosexual.
10,000 heterosexuals,
Okay.
50 are offenders, guilty of, right.
Child sexual offenders. Okay.
Okay. So that's 50 over 1,000. If you're at home, write a fraction, write this down,
Wait, is it over 1,000 or 10,000?
10,000.
Okay, you said 1,000.
50 over 10,000. All right.
Okay.
And now let's move over now to the other side of the equation, which are
Okay.
equal sign there, right? There are two sides to every equation, algebraic equation
Yeah,
separated
come on,
by an
come on,
equal
come on,
sign.
come on. I don't need the
Okay.
preamble.
All right. So the other side, let's say there are, because there are less, a lower amount of, of homosexuals than there are heterosexual. So there are only 100 total homosexuals, period.
Okay.
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 As opposed to 10,000,
Yeah.
right? Out of those 100 will say 70 are guilty or offenders child abuse.
So you're
Okay,
saying
so
seventy
we
percent of those
mhm,
out of the homosexuals.
right. So when you take the percentages, you have a overrepresentation of child molesters that are homosexual. That's what the argument is. We're not arguing that the sheer number of pedophiles are homosexual. We're
But you
arguing
haven't.
that
Okay.
within the
Ah, I see what you mean.
2%,
So you
there
haven't
are more.
demonstrated that
That's what the studies
the
demonstrate.
which studies? Because
The
I
studies I
have.
cited.
Okay, so let's go over one of them that you cited because I had to pull that one up just to make
Mm,
sure of something because I was a little familiar with
sure.
that one. So I will share my screen here. Let me see. Boom, 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 boom. Come on. Let us go with a Chrome tab.
And
Do, do,
while
do,
you're
do, do,
doing
do,
that, I'll
do.
also say that if
All
if
right.
a very small percentage of the population
Okay.
is responsible for 20, some say 40% of something as socially and personally troubling as child molestation,
Mm.
we would argue that something must be desperately wrong with that 2%.
Yeah, I know you're saying that. So
That's our
you're
argument.
familiar. You're familiar with this study. You cited this one, correct? The proportions of
Uh,
heterosexual and homosexual pedophiles among sex offenders against children,
yes.
exploratory study. Sweet.
Yeah, I
So,
cited part of the
yes,
abstract. Yeah.
sure, 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 sure. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm glad you said part of it. So, this was the part where you were quoting, right? Like these numbers look
Mhm.
familiar to 20 to 1, 2 to 1. Could you read for me, if you can see that, the last
Yeah.
two sentences here?
Yeah. Yeah. I should have read those last two
Could you
sentences. I
just go
couldn't
ahead and
put
read
them
them?
on my
Just go
slide.
ahead and
Yeah.
read them. Go
This
ahead and read it for
suggests
them.
that the resulting proportion of true pedophiles is what I just said.
Come on.
True pedophiles, right? That doesn't have a definition,
Come on,
right?
come on,
They're
come on,
citing
come on,
it, they're using it among
come on.
persons with homosexual erotic development is greater than that in persons who develop heterosexual. Exactly what I just said. This, of
And
course, which is also what I said in the beginning of my opening statement, would not indicate that males or males who are attracted to males, androphilic males, have greater propensity to
mhm,
offend children.
there
I
you go.
agree 100%.
So that
But
actually
that doesn't
undermines what the
erase
point
the
you're saying.
findings of the study. I agree
No, no. So
100%.
hang on. The
Agree.
actual the study is saying no, they don't have a greater propensity, which
I
is what you're
agree.
arguing for. You're
I
arguing
agree.
for
You
that though.
cannot say that doesn't mean because 15%, let's go back to the African American statistic
No,
that's
let's
thrown
stick
around.
specifically
Because
in what the example that you
okay,
just gave here.
because
You
the
stated
because
your
they
argument is that homosexual men have a greater propensity to sexually abuse children.
not
But the
because they're
one study, one of the
homosexuals.
actual, that's what you're saying. You
No,
gave the
li-
70 the out of 100. You were simply
no, no,
implying
those
that
numbers
you
were made
even
up.
stated,
Those numbers were made up.
I know you made those numbers up.
Yeah, just to
So
show you what proportionality
to,
is.
when it came to that, you were also stating that this is a homosexual issue. Your entire fucking slideshow
Mhm.
was beginning with showing that this is a problem with homosexuals
Yes, according to the
because they're
statistics.
coming
Yes.
after our Judeo-Christian
Yeah.
sensibilities and
Right.
sensitivities. But the actual study, this
Yes.
study that you
Do you
just
agree
read
with
it.
that study?
Yes, because
Okay. All right. So we agree.
it's demonstrating my position, which
It's
is
not. It's
it
saying
is.
it's
It's
stating at the end
you
of the.
just read it.
Okay. Let me respond. Let me
You
respond.
literally
It's
just
stating.
read the
It's
thing.
simply stating that even though
I love
these
it.
are the
I love it.
findings, we cannot conclude that simply because you're a homosexual, you will be more likely to molest. That is
Which
not
is what
true.
you
Just like,
argued.
hold on, let me finish. Let me finish.
So
Just
you're
like an
disagreeing
African,
with your own
hold
study.
on, let me finish. Did they disagree with their findings? Those were the findings of the study. They didn't
No,
contradict themselves within the
they
span of two
didn't, because they're
sentences.
saying this
They didn't
doesn't
so
show
you
that
think
there's a
they're
greater purpose.
contradicting themselves within the span of two
No,
sentences?
no, I'm not
Okay,
saying that
okay
at
then.
all.
So they're just well, let me explain what they're saying. They're simply saying, just like in the case of African Americans,
I love it.
yes, African Americans are, according to the statistics, are more likely to be involved in criminal acts. That
Actually,
doesn't
that's not true.
mean that you can pick out a random African American and say, hey, you are more likely to commit a crime because you're black. That
But here's
doesn't
the
erase
thing.
the fact, hold on, that doesn't erase the fact that people who look like you are committing the majority of the crimes, a very small percentage of the black community, by the way.
But
That's not
so
okay.
okay.
So when I get pulled over by the police, I understand those statistics are true. So when I get pulled over by the police, here's what I say. I know that I fit the description of somebody who probably committed a crime in my neighborhood a few minutes ago. I understand the statistics. That doesn't mean that I am a criminal. However, I understand that you're going based off the numbers to protect the community. So you pulled me over. Do your job, officer. And then I keep going. And I'm still alive because I have
Right.
that attitude.
You're
So
just ranting now and
all
rambling.
we're saying is accept what the statistics show. Do not
Yeah,
don't take the statistics and use them to
yeah,
discriminate,
which
but
is
just
what you're
accept.
doing.
That's
Yeah,
that's
which
what the study concluded. You
that's what
cannot
you
go
and
to an
other
African
anti-gay
American
activists are
and
doing.
say you're a criminal because of
So, yeah,
1550.
so you're just rambling now. So again, I
Okay.
want to make this very, very fucking clear. So, is this is a yes or no question.
Mhm.
Is the discussion that's supposed to be happening between you and I right now, is the proposal, the proposition of that, is it, are gay men more likely to sexually abuse children? Yes or no?
According to the statistics,
No, no,
yes.
no, 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 no. Hang on, hang
Yes.
on. That's not what I asked you. So make sure you pay real fucking close attention, sweetheart.
Mhm.
The discussion that's going on between you and I right now that we have agreed upon, is it, are
Yes.
gay men more likely to sexually abuse children?
That's what you
I,
just read
I
in the study.
hang on, hang
How
on, hang on, hang
yes.
on, hang on, hang on. I asked you about the agreement between you and I regarding this
Yes.
discussion here.
Yes.
Good boy. That's a good boy.
Yes. That's what the
Now,
study just
now,
concluded. Yes.
now, no, so no, and you just read that. I think you have some reading comprehension issues because
Uh-huh.
again, you read it. I had you read the very study
Yeah.
that you cited,
And let me read it
which
again.
says here, I'm going to read it this time.
Okay.
It
Go
says, I'm
ahead.
going to read the two sentences that
The
I
two
highlighted
last sentences,
exclusively
yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Most
yeah.
studies
Yeah,
do
yeah.
that
Hang on, hang
in
on.
the
No, no,
end.
no. Hang on, hang
Yes.
on. You're going to
After
shut your
stating the
mouth now.
facts,
Hang
they
on,
come
hang
out
on,
and
hang
say,
on.
well,
Hang on,
this
hang on.
doesn't necessarily
Hang on.
prove that if you're gay or if you're black, you're going to commit a crime. That's a
I
fact.
love it.
That
I
doesn't
love it.
prove that you're gay,
I love it.
therefore pedophilia. That's not my
Which is
argument.
what you're
I
arguing.
understand you want to prop that up as my argument because you feel like that's the only win you can have, but that's
No,
never
no,
my
I got
argument.
others.
That's not
During
my
your
argument.
opening
Okay,
statement,
so
I
let's
actually
move on
wrote down
to
questions.
my
No, no, no.
argument.
I want to
My
make sure
argument
this is
is that
clear for
that's
my
what the
audience.
statistics
Uh,
show. That's
no,
my argument.
I'm going to make this clear for my audience, right? So I just had you read two sentences after the point. You
Uh,
even admitted that you only read part or cited part of this study in
Part
your
of the
opening
abstract,
statement.
yeah. The part that
Yes.
can fit, yeah,
Yeah.
on my slide.
Sure. Yeah. That
Yeah.
confirms
So
your
how does
bias.
that
Absolutely.
contradict? So answer me this. How
Because
does that
okay. Okay.
contradict that last sentence or two? How does that contradict the study? It doesn't. They're
No,
simply stating the
here,
fact,
here.
they're simply stating the fact that this does not prove
I
that
love it.
if you get a random
So,
black person or a
so,
random gay person, he's going to be a
so,
pedophile. That's all they're
so
saying.
what's fun? So what's funny is that you're now arguing a straw man and you haven't listened to me because
Okay.
my objection isn't to the study. My objection is to your conclusion, which
Mhm.
is that it is right. The Again, I want to remind people of the proposition that you and I agreed on. That's going to be the question of this discussion, which is: are gay men more likely to sexually abuse children? You're
Hmm.
taking the affirmative position that yes, indeed, gay men are more likely to sexually abuse children. And
Hmm.
again, you're going to shut the fuck up in your opening statement, in the little slideshow that you did with your little memes and your cute little bullshit. You cited this specific abstract,
Right.
and again even admitted that you only cited part of it,
Yeah.
which cut off the portion that disagrees with the very position that you hold in this discussion.
Okay.
So
All
do
right. Pull
not
that
give
up
me,
again for me. Pull it up again for me.
it's right in front of
Can
you.
you blow it up so everyone can see it?
Sure.
Can you blow it
Oh,
up?
absolutely,
Okay.
I
All right.
absolutely
I'm gonna show
can.
you how silly you sound right now.
Okay,
So
okay, okay.
let's read where
Sure,
the site that my argument is. Okay.
sure.
My argument is that the statistics in several
Mhm.
studies
Several studies.
suggest that the resulting proportion of true pedophiles among homosexuals is greater than heterosexual. That's my argument. Now,
If
if you want to come to if you want to suggest that these individuals are contradicting their study, you're an idiot. They're not
that's not what I'm
contradicting
arguing.
their study by saying, well, this, of course, would not indicate
Oh,
that
I love
males
it.
who are attracted to males have a greater
This is which is what
propensity
you're
to
arguing.
offend children.
Which is
That's
what you
not
were
my
arguing.
argument.
Yes, it is. Then why did you
My
agree to
argument
this
is that the
discussion with me?
studies
Why did
suggest that the resulting proportion of
I
true
love it.
pedophiles. So, are you suggesting that they're contradicting themselves within the span of two sentences?
I already answered this question. I'm not gonna
Okay,
answer it again
you're not
for
going to
you.
answer the correct. So they're not
I already
contradicting
answered it.
themselves. Okay, so are
I
they
already answered
contradicting
it.
themselves?
I already answered this
Oh,
question.
oh, they
You
are
know my
contradicting them.
answer.
You don't
No,
know.
no,
Okay, so you're just going to hone in on one sentence
no,
as
no,
if
no, I'm
that
not. It's
cancels out all the other information
no, no,
there.
no, 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 no.
Okay.
When I saw that, because I had a feeling that you would cite this specific study.
Uh,
I wanted to point this one up during your opening statement. Forgot English for a second. I wanted to prop this one up during your opening statement because I knew you would ignore the last two sentences of that.
no,
And
I didn't.
again, I
Actually,
want to.
I stated
You
it in my
didn't.
opening that this does not mean that every gay person is a homo or is going to offend children. But what
So,
we do know
oh,
is that of the people who do
s-
offend children, the
sure,
proportion of those who offend children
are
from the gay
heterosexual.
community is greater than
It's
that
not.
of the heterosexual community. That's all we're saying. If
You
you want
haven't
to prop up a
demonstrated that.
straw man and knock that down again, go right ahead. But
I
that's not
love
my
it.
argument.
So we're
I'm
gonna
arguing
move
what the
on
studies conclude.
from you didn't, but we're gonna move on from that particular study. So there was something else that you brought up. There was a person that you brought up that again I had a feeling you would bring them up too.
Oh,
There
person. I was
was
going to attack the source. Okay.
no. Oh, so there's a reason I say the person because this person, the specific person that you cited multiple times,
Mhm.
um, is
Cameron.
notorious. Yes,
Of course he is.
Mr.
Yeah.
Paul Cameron.
Well, Cameron. Yeah.
So the specific study, or actually, it's actually not even a study. What you cited from Paul Cameron, it's a survey. It's actually a series of surveys that he and his group conducted. Uh, can I let me ask you this? How familiar are you with Paul Cameron? Hello.
Yeah.
How familiar are you
Um,
with Dr. Paul Cameron?
uh, read some of his articles in some journals, some Christian journals that I've read in the past. Why is that? Because he's a Christian. He doesn't. His research doesn't count. What's the problem?
No. I'm not going based
Okay.
on his Christian stuff
Oh,
like that.
okay.
So, I think another thing that people should be familiar with is because I've heard you state that you're not a big fan of liberals, and you tend to. I think I've heard you state that you tend to have a bit more of a critical eye or what you think is a critical eye towards uh, academia as
Mm,
it pertains to research after, if I'm not mistaken, I've heard you say
not
after
true.
2000, right?
Not true.
So
What?
you haven't stated that any sort of research that's done after 2000s you should take with a more skeptical eye. You haven't stated that at all anywhere.
Well, yeah. But what I
Okay.
mean by that is that
Hmm.
there isn't any more research. Why do you think why do you
Interesting.
think
Okay.
there that even your study that you
Hmm.
cited was in the 70s? Why? Because they
Well,
have stopped researching, they have stopped asking the
no.
question, they have stopped debating this issue. That's why.
So
Because they don't want the facts to come out, which is
so
why
did
your
I
study,
w-
you
I
couldn't
want to.
find a study
No, no,
older than 1970?
no,
You
no.
couldn't
So
find a
could
study older. Why
hang on.
is that?
So hang
Why is
on.
this channel going to be shut
Let me
down
let me ask you a
once
question.
this
Let me
hits the
ask you a question
algorithm?
really quick before we move on to more Paul Cameron.
Uh,
What was the latest study that I cited? What was
it's from the
the
70s.
more current study that I cited?
I think you said 94. The study that
So
was
there's
worthless because it didn't deal with proportionality, which I
so
debunked.
so I didn't so like in my opening statement at all, I didn't say cite Abel and Harlow child molestation prevention study from 2001. I didn't cite that one at all.
2001, right? 20 years
I
ago.
didn't
Yeah.
I didn't cite that one at all.
2001, right.
But you said okay.
Where are the
So
studies in 2020? Where
so
are the
let's
studies
move
in
on.
2015 during the Obama
Sure.
administration in
I
2008?
don't care.
Where are
So
those
let's
studies?
move back on to
They don't
Paul Cameron.
exist
So
because they don't want to discuss it.
you cited Paul Cameron's surveys
Yeah.
from I think it was 83, 84, and 85, right?
Hmm.
Do you know the methodology of those particular surveys?
What do you mean by methodology?
So what he and his group utilized to get people to respond to the specific surveys. Are you familiar with those methodologies?
No.
Okay, so do you know with those particular surveys, did do you know where they were conducted at all?
Which survey?
The 1983. Let's go with the 1983, 1984 surveys. Do you know where they were conducted?
There was a study that was done from jail, and they interviewed child molesters, actual sex offenders who were in jail.
I specifically said the 1983, 1984 surveys. Do you know where they were
Uh,
conducted?
the No. What? Why is that relevant?
So it's relevant one because you cited them.
Okay,
Um,
tell us
but
where they were
sure.
conducted.
Oh, absolutely, I can.
Yeah.
So they were conducted in 6 municipalities, if I'm not mistaken,
Hmm.
in obviously here in the United States.
Right.
Six specific municipalities,
Okay. Great. I like that. Yeah.
many of which were in Nebraska, if I'm not mistaken, Omaha,
Hmm.
Nebraska, Texas.
Why is this relevant?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I'm
Yes,
glad you're
please.
pushing me forward. So they're relevant because I think it was the case that, and people can correct me on this, almost 18,000 um, people were contacted for these particular
That's a
surveys, right?
great survey. That's a great sample size.
That's fucking excellent,
Yeah.
right? Like you want that. Do you know how many of that 18,000 responded?
Um. Hopefully more than 50. Otherwise, the survey is useless.
Oh, so um, I think it was close to 900.
That's excellent.
Responded.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. It would be excellent.
Yeah.
So I know you've stated specifically to me that you've taught statistics, right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So you would be able to correct me about what I'm about to say, and anyone else who's familiar with statistics would also be able to correct me. From what I understand, when it comes to conducting surveys, a it's not about the sample size so much because sometimes you don't get enough people to respond to something, but it's not so much about the sample size but the percentage of the respondents to that survey, right?
No, the percentage of respondents to
Really,
a survey is irrelevant.
really,
Yeah. So you're
really.
just propping up
So
another irrelevant
no
factoid.
I, so I bring that up specifically because again, I'm not a science bitch, but I think if it's not the if it's the case, if you're doing 18,000 people doing that you want responding to a particular survey, and only 900 or so of those people respond to said survey, from what I understand, that's less than a quarter of the people that are responding to your survey.
Why is
And
this relevant?
not just
Please
that,
explain.
sure. So, from what I've read, statisticians and sociologists generally accept 75% of your respondents going to a survey.
What's your
So,
citation for that, please?
sure, that is Dr. Gregory Herrick.
What do
And
you mean by
again,
what do they accept 75% of what do you,
respondents to a particular survey because it helps with the margin of error, right? So if you're only having 23% of the people in your survey
wait, let's back
respond,
up.
sure,
Let's
sure, sure,
back
sure,
up.
sure.
Let's back up. All
Absolutely.
right. So
Absolutely.
you
Mhm.
do a survey and
Uh-huh.
you seek out a thousand people. You
Sure.
send the survey to 1,000 people.
Hmm.
Only 500 respond. Does
Hmm.
that mean your survey? And let's say I do the same survey or a different survey, and
Hmm.
800 people respond to my
Hmm.
survey. That
Hmm.
how is that in any way affecting the validity of the survey itself? What it could represent is that the survey question is
Hmm.
not something people are comfortable answering. That's
Sure.
all you can determine from
Yes.
that. That's
Oh,
all
yes.
you can
Okay.
determine from that.
Thank you for that. But
Yes.
not just that. There's another point that I'm surprised you didn't go on that. So the when I was bringing up the margin of error aspect, where you did 500 out of the 1,000 respond, 800 out of the 1,000 respond, you would take the 800 a little more as indicative of a general population, or it gives you a good idea of a more general population, right? Whereas the 500 out of the 1,000 may mostly, as you've kind of said, only be indicative of the respondents to that specific survey, right? So I want to tie this back into Paul Cameron. So with that 23, I want to make sure that's drilled into people's minds. So 23% of the 18,000 responded to his these particular surveys. Now again,
That's pretty good.
I want to understand. I want people to understand that these again, even by Paul Cameron's and his group's admission, these particular surveys weren't meant to be indicative of a more general population. They were actually specifically sent to these 6 municipalities for a specific reason, and that was to promote legislation that further discriminates against gay people. And I'm not joking about that. That
Irrelevant.
is his
It's irrelevant.
particular. Well, it is
I know you're
relevant
joking, but it's
because
irrelevant.
no, it is relevant
That
because if
it's
you're
not.
conducting, well, here's the reason.
It's not.
So if you're conducting a
It
survey,
doesn't do anything to
if you're
discredit
conducting a
the
survey,
findings of the study.
if you're conducting a survey that's specifically designed and tailored, curtailed for a specific purpose, in this case, being discriminatory or providing ammunition for anti-gay activists like you,
Irrelevant. It's
that is
irrelevant.
a problem,
It's
right?
irrelevant.
That is a
It's an irrelevant problem,
huge
but it
fucking problem.
it is
It's
a
much in
problem
the
for
same
you, but it's
vein.
irrelevant.
No, it would be like it would be in the vein that if you have elected officials who are like, hey, you know what, we're going to go to uh this research group right here. We're going to ask them to do a specific survey asking people if they wanted if they wanted criminals living among them. And then included within that survey, we say, are they familiar with the fact that Black people commit more crime? And so, would you want, if we are showing that Black people commit more crime, would you want these criminals among your population, right? People in that survey say no. The politicians will then say, okay, based on the results of this particular survey, people don't generally want to live around criminals. Criminals are generally, and they tend to associate criminals with Black people. So, therefore, why don't we put legislation in place that segregates and separates Black people from, say, white people or other sort of racial groups here in the United States, and let's get that shoehorned into state houses of law, and maybe eventually using that as the model for a federal sort of way to look at, hey, maybe we can just have national sort of
Okay,
segregation.
why is
That's
this
essentially,
relevant?
it's
Why is this
irrelevant.
relevant?
It's relevant again because if you're a group, if you're an individual, if you are a surveyor who is
You have to
specifically,
prove a bias in the
who's,
survey, sir.
oh,
You have
sure,
to take a
sure,
survey and
sure.
just suggest because it was used for what you might consider to be a nefarious purpose that it
Well,
somehow discredits the survey. Prove the
absolutely. Okay.
survey to be
Sure, sure, sure.
invalid, please.
So, well, no, no. So I don't even really have to prove the survey invalid. I let Paul Cameron sort of
But you
demonstrate that
didn't. Okay,
because
let me give you an
he
example. Now you
himself
talk. Let
he
me respond.
himself he
Yeah,
himself spoke to the local news in,
but that
if I'm
doesn't
not
discredit the
mistaken,
survey. Okay.
Nebraska. In this, hang on, in Nebraska,
Uh-huh.
when it was being conducted, when the survey was people going out,
Hmm.
it's being sent out to people, he went on like the local media and said, yes, this survey is designed to hopefully get legislation that
Amen. That doesn't
that
discredit the
it,
survey. Let me
no, but it
respond now.
does,
No, it
because
doesn't.
now, yeah,
How?
no, I'm about to explain that
Yes,
to you,
please.
because you've now you've now created a bias in the minds of the very people that are going to be answering your survey.
No, it was a
They
blind
now
survey.
have, no, it
It's
wasn't.
false.
It
It was a
wasn't.
blind
They
survey.
actually now have it in their mind, like, oh, I heard Paul Cameron and his group are conducting this survey, and
Ah,
he said this is why he's
okay.
doing that,
All right.
and so therefore
Wait. So now you
that
have to
can
prove that. Now you have to
bias.
prove that
Sure.
that it wasn't
Oh,
a
no, no.
blind survey. You have to
Okay,
prove that. Okay, so
sure.
you have to prove
So
that they even knew who Paul Cameron was, which I doubt you did. so, uh, so,
sure,
that's a claim you have to prove. You'll never find Paul
sure.
Cameron saying we announced that this was a
Oh,
Christian
really?
group.
Okay, okay.
And okay,
I
so
didn't say it
let
was a
me just
Christian group.
respond to your
So
while you're
so
looking that up. Let me
no,
just
I
respond to
found it.
your
I've actually
irrelevant
found it.
factoid.
No, no,
Okay.
so I've
Well,
actually found it. You
well, let me
know, where
respond
it's
to what you
from?
said earlier, please,
Well, I wanna
if I
read you
can.
where, I'm gonna read it really quick,
Okay, go
where
ahead.
you could people can actually find where
Sure.
Paul Cameron said this.
This
It was
wasn't a
the
blind survey. Go ahead.
it wasn't, yeah. It
Okay.
was in the Omaha World Herald of May 23rd, 1983, in which
Hmm.
he specifically stated that. And not just that, in that
Can you
article,
quote, please?
let me get that for you. Do-do-do-do-do. Ah,
He
come
said it
on.
wasn't a blind survey.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
he said it was not.
uh
Da-da-da-da, da-da-da. Let me get the quote from him. Okay, da-da-da-da. Okay, here we go. So the actual quote from Paul Cameron. This again, this was yes. So it's the Omaha World Herald. Let me actually, yeah, the Omaha World Herald, May 23rd, 1983, front page. And the headline of this particular article was Lincoln Man, Poll Will Help Oppose Gays. Here's a specific quote from Paul Cameron. Okay, so the Omaha, he said, is expected to rank low, Cameron said. With about half the door to door Omaha polling completed, he said respondents who identify themselves as homosexuals are running about 2%. Cameron said he believes previous surveys, including those conducted by Playboy magazine, have overestimated the amount of homosexuality and veterism, sexual behavior in the United States. This will be a fair sexuality poll, not
okay.
one based on volunteers. It will show most people lead sexual lives
Okay,
far
you're not
different from
giving
what
me
the
what I
Playboy
where does
survey
it say
suggests.
there that it's a blind survey, sir? He
Uh,
never
it,
said it wasn't a
but
blind survey. You made that
but
up.
no, no,
All
no,
right,
no, no.
so
He's
let me
so
respond
he
to the
says
entire
right there
okay.
that he is sending this out to all Omahans, that
What's
this
wrong with
specific
that? That's a
survey.
survey.
But
That's what you
no, no,
do in a survey.
here's the
You send it
thing.
out to everyone in the city, or
But
you
here's
send
the
it out to
thing. That's not a
Omahanians.
blind survey. That
Yes, it
means
is
people.
a
No, it
blind.
isn't.
Okay,
People know
let
that
me
it's coming
educate you on
from him.
what an
No, no, no.
unblind. Let
people
me
know
educate you.
that
What
it's
is a
coming
blind
from
survey?
his group.
What is
People
a
know
blind?
that it's
Define
coming
blind survey,
People
please.
know that it's coming from his specific group. A blind survey would be
No
so
one
that
even
you
knows
don't
who Paul
know who it's
Cameron
coming.
is. You're making it
Yes,
seem like this was
no, no,
President
no,
Trump walking
no,
around
no, no.
doing a
They
survey. Do
know
you want me
what
to be?
right
Do you want
here.
to vote for me next year?
Here it is.
That's that's not what's
No,
going
here
on
it
here,
is.
bro.
Look, it says Lincoln psychologist Paul Cameron. They
Uh,
know who he is. He is a local. They
okay.
know who Paul
Was
Cameron
Omaha
is.
the only state? Was Omaha the
No,
only state
no,
he worked in?
he was well known.
Okay, is Omaha the only state that he worked in that he did the survey in?
No, 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 no. He
Oh,
did
so
it
why are you bringing
mostly.
up that fact that he did it in his home state? Of course, he
No, no,
did it
no,
in his home state. That's the closest place to him. All right,
no.
so here's the problem with your assessment. You can
So
laugh
I
if you
want to
want because you know your
I want to
argument
make
is
people
terrible.
clear
Uh,
that
here's the problem. Here's
Joel's
the problem.
sources here are incredibly
So
biased. So
so
please
hold on.
understand.
Now you're saying he's biased because he
I
chose
think
to
we're
do
about
the
done.
survey in his home state,
No,
although
no,
he
no,
did the survey in
no,
other states.
no,
You're
no, no,
making
no.
it seem as though Omaha was the only state he did the
No, I
survey
didn't.
in
No, no, no,
where
no, no,
everyone knows him. Okay,
no,
if he
no, no,
had
no.
done the survey in his own state, in his own neighborhood, where people know who he is, then you might have an argument. But that's not the case, is it? Did he do the
No,
survey in other states?
I didn't. I say he did in
Okay, so
six
why are you bringing
different
up the fact that he
municipalities.
did it in his home state also? Why is
Well,
that relevant?
one because that's one of the municipalities,
One of them is of six.
well, because I think it was 2 or 3 that were
So that's a
in
blind survey.
Nebraska.
That would be the
So no, no, no,
definition of
no,
a blind
no, no,
survey, sir.
no, it's not
Can
if
you
you
define
know.
blind survey?
Sure, you don't know the group or the people behind get this specific survey, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
So the
that's
people
it.
in, so
So the
everyone in his hometown knew who he was?
people knew who he was, yes,
Okay,
because and
here's what a
not
blind
just in his
survey is.
hometown, not
Okay,
just in
here's
his
what a blind
hometown, but
survey is. A
okay,
blind
I wanna
survey,
make it also clear. I wanna make it also clear. It's just not that he was known in his hometown. He was also, if I'm not mistaken, I think it says it here. Da-da-da-da-da. Yes, he was the chairman of the Family Research Institute,
mhm.
which is
Yeah,
a
so
well-known,
here's what a
nationally
blind
well-known
study
thing.
or a
So
blind
there you go.
survey is, okay, which you haven't proven. You haven't proven because he
Oh,
did the survey in his home state that it was a
I
blind
literally
it
said that.
wasn't a blind survey. All right. Here's what the blind survey
I
is. A
love it.
blind study or a blind survey
Mhm.
is a market research study that does not disclose the researcher or the
Yep,
sponsor of
yep,
the research.
yep, and
Okay.
this
So
wasn't
you
that.
would have to prove, here's what you would have to prove it wasn't a blind study,
Uh-huh, sure.
that he himself went
Yeah.
to every single door, knocked on every
No,
door, and said,
no,
"Hi, I'm such and such from the Christian Research Institute. Do you want
I
to
didn't
take
say
this
that.
survey?" You would have to
No.
prove that. Can you prove that, sir?
Actually, in this article, it says that he and his group, not just he personally, I didn't even make that claim. I said his group actually sent out people letting them know that yes, indeed, this is from Paul Cameron and the Cameron group
I
doing this
didn't read
specific
that in the
survey.
quote. I
And
didn't read that in the quote.
in this, well, it's a whole article. I'm not going to read the whole goddamn thing, and it
Okay.
actually says that. But he himself, again, in this specific article, did an interview in the
You
local
you
newspaper
didn't read that. Can
saying
you read the
what
part
the
where he
goal
says
of
that
the
that's the case? Do
Jesus.
you have the actual
Uh,
literature where
uh,
the survey was conducted on, or the paper that the survey was conducted on that had their stamp of approval, or their waterhead or watermark, or some sort of letterhead that says Christian Research Institute survey? Do you have any evidence, sir?
of the actual survey?
Right, you're
Wait, you
claiming
want
that
me
this
to?
wasn't a
You
blind
want
survey. You're
now?
claiming that
I
everyone that
just
took the
read the
survey knew. Well,
article
hold on.
in which he said that
You're
this was the
claiming that
goal of the
everyone
specific survey.
that you're claiming, yes, the
Oh,
goal
this is
that has
good. I'm
nothing to
getting
do with the survey in of
uh-uh.
and of itself. For example, if I want to end violence in
Mhm.
the black community and I feel as though that's a cause, and I decide I want to do a blind survey of the people in certain neighborhoods, certain ghettos, right? Because that's the area I'm targeting, that's the area I want to fix. All right.
But you don't let
I'm
them
doing
know
a
that you're
survey.
but you
And
don't
I'm
let them
saying
know
to these
you're the
people,
one
look,
doing this.
this
No,
was this survey. Hold on, let me finish. This survey was done in your own
I love it.
neighborhood, and this
I
was
love
the
it.
results. Let's go down to the courthouse and let's file a complaint, or let's write to our congressman to try to fix the problem. There's nothing wrong with that. You can't come along
I didn't
later and
say there
say,
was
well,
anything
that
wrong.
survey doesn't count because you used it for political means. That's
No, no, no.
ridiculous.
That's not what
That's
I
the
said
purpose
either.
for a survey and for information and data is to make changes in legislation. That's
No,
the
here's my
purpose.
thing. Here's
That's
the
the why we
problem.
do research, sir.
Here's the problem with the analogy you attempted to use there. Your goal there was to, in a sense, ameliorate the conditions of the individuals there, right?
Amen. Yes.
So when it comes to
Which is
Paul
also the
Cameron,
goal here.
no, it isn't. It's actually
Okay, because you
to
disagree.
no,
You
no, no, no.
disagree with the
It's
cause. That's
no,
fine.
no, 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 no. It's not because I disagree with the cause. It's the fact here that he has specifically stated that it's to oppose any sort of legislation or any sort of amelioration or anything like that.
Amen.
That
That
for
doesn't
gay
discredit the
people
survey.
to well, it does
Amen.
because you now have a
How?
specific bias,
How is
a
that? No, it's
specific
not a bias.
bias.
You need to
Yes, it
prove
is.
a
You just
bias in
described
the actual survey, not a
everything is
bias
to
in the
oppose
surveyor.
this
Okay,
specific
hold on.
group
You
of
you all right,
people.
statistically, you need to prove, according to common
Oh
sense,
boy.
you
And
need
it
to
was
prove a bias in the survey, not that the surveyor is a Christian or he might be
it's
biased.
not
But
because he was a Christian. I never
here's what
mentioned that.
Paul Cameron found. 153
Oh, I love it.
pederasts. Those are men who molest
I
boys.
love it.
153. This is what he found in his survey in his 1985 study, when it came out 2 years after he did his surveying. Right,
Mhm.
153 pederasts had sexually molested 22,981 boys. That's close to 23,000 boys over an age or average period of 22 years.
Can I ask you a quick question?
153 molested 22 or 23,000.
Let me ask you
That's what he found. So if he
quick
reports
clarifying
on that,
question.
how is
So,
that bias?
no, no, because
You haven't proved anything wrong with the
so
survey. All
I'm
you've
going to
proven
do
is that
something.
it's a Christian that's
Hang on.
doing it.
I didn't say I never mentioned his religious views. So I'm going to ask you a quick question. You said that was the 1985 study, correct? Well,
Yeah.
multiple series of questions. Where was that data based on? Was that data the 1985 study? Was that data or survey? No, in this case, if I'm not mistaken, it actually is a study. Um, was that specific data based on the survey data that he took in 1983 and 1984?
This is the statistics on child abuse in general from
Yeah,
the National Committee of Preventive Child Abuse or something like that. They
but you
publish this
just said that it
information.
was Paul Cameron. Sure, sure. So it's
Yeah,
Paul
they publish
Cameron's.
the information. Yeah,
Sure, cool, cool. So, but it's Paul Cameron's data, correct? And his group's
it
data,
was his
the
study,
Cameron group.
yes,
Sweet. So again,
along
I
with
want to go
several
back.
others that they
Sure, sure, sure.
studied
I want,
or they
but listen,
cited. Yeah,
but is the data that 1985 from the Cameron group? Is that specifically from his data that he conducted in the 1983 and 1984 surveys? Do you
might
know?
be some, might
It
be. Yeah,
is. I know what it is. So we're
great.
actually getting it's
Great, you haven't
almost nine.
discounted the study,
No,
so I mean,
so
you you haven't
I mean,
discounted it by saying, "Oh, he did it because he wanted to change legislation or
sure,
for
sure, sure.
political reasons." You
So
haven't discredited the study, sir,
sure.
and you
So
haven't proven it's a blind study because he did it in his hometown and
I
then did it in six other states. That's not a
yeah,
blind study. A
yes,
blind study
sure.
means that you're
You don't
telling
know who
people,
people are.
"Hey, this is for a Christian. This is
No,
for
no, 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 no. A blind
this is a
study is you
Christian,
don't know
and
who's
this is a
behind
Christian
the specific
organization."
survey or anything like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Paul Cameron didn't
So,
knock on anyone's doors. He probably just sent
so,
out flyers or probably did the survey
so,
some other way. They didn't
so
know
I'm
who
going to
Dr. Paul
read.
Cameron was.
So
Please, come
it's
on, man.
just about
You can do
nine.
better than that.
It's just about 9 a.m. So I'll end.
Okay.
We're just going to end it here. But I'll end with, at least for me, I'll end with this specific quote from. Let me see if I can get this.
Well, don't I get to
Uh,
ask some questions?
Oh, we're
Yeah,
actually
yeah. Just
ending.
one,
It's
just two
9.
questions.
Sure. Okay.
Two questions. Okay. The findings of the study. The study reported that the ratio.
Which study could you clarify,
This
please?
is the Watson study.
Okay.
Proportionality of heteros
Yes.
versus
Yes. Yes.
homo.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Yes.
so the study found
Oops.
that the ratio of hetero to homo pedophiles was 11 to 1. Do you agree with what that study found?
Let me actually read it. Okay, read it in its context.
Same study
Using
that you were reading
phallometric. No,
from
no,
the
no. I'm
abstract
I'm
from.
looking. I'm making sure that I read the entire context of it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so using phallometric test sensitivities to calculate the proportion uh, of true pedophiles among various groups of sex offenders against children, and taking into consideration previously reported mean numbers, that's interesting, of victims per offender group. The ratio of heterosexual to homosexual pedophiles was calculated to be approximately 11 to 1. So it looks like, from what
Mhm.
I'm understanding from this particular abstract, there were more heterosexual than homosexual pedophiles. It's 11 to 1 ratio. For
Right.
every one homosexual sexual offender, there are 11
Okay.
heterosexual.
So you agree with that?
I get based on this study, sure.
Okay. All right.
Based on
So
this abstract.
so when they go on to say
Hmm.
that this suggests that
Hmm.
the proportion of true pedophiles
Hmm.
of homosexuals is greater than heterosexual, you don't accept that part.
I don't. I have to understand what it means.
Okay,
No,
thank
no.
you.
So, no, no, no.
Thank you.
I
That's
need to
that's all I
understand what
had.
true pedophile means.
Nice
It's not that
talking
I
to you.
disagree. It's not that I disagree. I need to know what they mean by true
Okay, so
pedophile.
what we have here, oh, go
What
ahead.
do
I'll
they
let
mean
you
by
do your
true pedophile?
conclusion. I'll let you do
I,
your conclusion.
I don't really have a. Okay.
You have to
Let me
ask
get
Freud what
something.
he means by true pedophile.
Yeah, I need to know what they specifically mean by true pedophile, because it doesn't provide that at all in that
Mm,
abstract,
okay.
right?
All right.
Because
So you
that
need more
means,
information.
yeah, sure.
Okay.
But based
All
on, even if you just read based on the entirety of that abstract, it does not support what you're saying
right. Mm.
here based on the proposition that you
That's
and
all
I
I'm
are
saying.
discussing.
I'm saying that studies
So,
determined. All I'm saying is that studies determined that the ratio of pedophiles
mm,
with homosexual development is greater than those who are hetero. I've been
but the,
talking about proportionality all morning. You can continue to ignore proportionality if you'd like. You like the 11 to 1. You like that ratio, don't you?
no, it's not that I like it. I'm just saying it's
But you don't want to
interesting.
accept the other ratios. I
No,
get it.
there's no other ratios, but no,
Uh,
I'm saying that based on this information, they're supporting what I'm saying. It's just that you're trying
mhm,
to get in, like, well, yeah, it's like I said earlier, it's like you're saying, okay, well, yeah, you're more likely to be sexually abused by a heterosexual male, but let's just focus on the homosexual and say, well, there's a greater number there, so let's just focus on that bit. That's
because of the
what
proportionality,
that,
the
that
overrepresentation, right?
no,
Because
so
there is an
you're missing
overrepresentation.
the
Yeah.
forest for the trees, right? When you do that, and that's incredibly dangerous,
Right.
right?
So
That's what you're doing,
like the
and that's not
survey
what the
clearly
researchers are
says,
doing.
we cannot go based off of the ratio of 11 to 1 because that's not the true
That's
proportion.
not what it says at all.
You have to be, well, this is what math says. This is what
No,
proportionality
no,
says.
no, no, no.
Okay,
That's what you
let's
say.
go back to our math equation, okay?
That's not what
You
I want to
cannot
be clear.
say
That's not what this abstract says. That's
yes,
what
that
you
is what it
say.
says.
It doesn't
This
say you can't go
suggests, hold
by
on.
this
Okay,
11 to
now
1.
you would
Ignore
think
this.
that
You're saying that.
you would think that you had a victory
Oh,
there when you
great.
saw the 11
No, I
to
don't
1.
think that I have a victory at all. I'm not looking. No, no, no.
Hetero
I'm
to
not looking
homo,
at
11
this.
to 1.
I'm
Yay,
not.
we win.
No. So I'm not
No,
looking at this
11
as
to
a
what?
victory or anything like this.
Here's what the
My
proportionality
goal
should be.
here, my
Here
goal
here's what
here is to
well,
show
let me
how dishonest you are, and how
I
much,
didn't. You
again,
didn't. You failed.
I want to show
You
that,
failed miserably.
as I said before, you're missing the forest from the
No, you're
trees, right?
missing the
Is
forest for
that
the trees because you're ignoring
you
proportionality.
I'm not.
This
I'm not.
survey did
So
not ignore
you,
proportionality, and
I
that's why you
agree.
can't stand it. That's why
No,
you
no,
want to
no.
hone on the last
It's not
sentence
that
where it said this doesn't mean that if you're gay, you're a pedophile. Yes, we're
but
all saying that. We're all
no, you're
saying
not.
that.
No, but
We're all
again,
saying that. No
in the
one is saying
context
anything
here,
otherwise. All right. If you
in the
want to prop that
context
up
here,
as your
in the
straw man, go
context
right
here,
ahead.
in the
All we're
context
saying,
here,
all
in the
we're saying is
context
that the
here, in the
proportion
context here, in
is
the
over. There's an
context here, in the
overrepresentation.
context
That's all
here,
we're saying.
in the context here, again, if you're having the discussion, right, which we are supposed to be having, in the context of the discussion, which is are gay men more likely to sexually abuse children? You have not demonstrated that.
I have.
Instead,
The studies have.
instead, actually, they haven't.
The studies have. 11
Instead,
to 1. What, let me ask you
that's
this. What
heterosexual to
should be the
homosexual.
ratio? All right. So
I don't know
if
what
all right,
should be the ratio.
if you have let's take African Americans for example.
No,
African
so I think
Americans
we're
make
done
up
here because
15% of the
you're no
population,
longer
correct?
like you're. I don't care. Like that
Okay,
doesn't
you
have
don't care about
anything.
statistics, you don't
That
care
doesn't
about
have
numbers
anything to do
because
with the
you're a
actual
liberal.
discussion here.
That's why.
Sure. So
So in the world
that's the
where
end of here.
facts matter, in the world where facts matter,
Ugh.
we care about these numbers. We study them.
You
We
don't.
use them to
You
better
don't.
our world.
You
We don't
completely
ignore them
ignored
because they
the
say
actual
things that we
studies
don't
that you
like to
tried to
hear.
cite.
Okay.
You ignored the actual information that the specific
11 to
surveys and
1.
abstracts
I
that
didn't
you
ignore 11
attempted
to
to
1. I included that.
cite.
I included that. I included the 11 to
but
1, right?
but you're
But
but
the
here's
11 to 1 is an indictment, sir. That's an
oh,
indictment, but you don't realize it
on
because you don't understand proportionality.
no, I
That's your
understand
problem.
proportionality. It's
You do
just that
not
you
understand.
don't
So
understand
if
English.
somebody said that if the proportion is 11 to 1,
Jeez.
your proportion based on the percentage of homosexuals, the proportion of homosexuality or child abusers should be less than 1%. It should be less
Huh?
than a 5.5%. It should be so small
But you haven't
proportionally. If
demonstrated
you
what
compare if you compare the proportion of heterosexual deviants or child abusers, and it's
I love it.
disproportionately out of control. So let me give
Disproportionate.
you
You
another
haven't
example, a really
demonstrated that.
simple
No,
example.
we're
If you
done.
have,
We're done here
oh, we're
because
done. Oh,
yeah,
okay. I start talking
because
facts
it's
and we're done. All
no,
right.
it's not that. It's just that it's 9. It's
It's
like we're
9. All
way
right.
over.
Okay.
We're way
We'll have a part 2.
we
But I
won't.
want to
But
get into just I want to get into proportionality
we won't
with
have
you,
a part
Carlton, because
2.
I know you're a smart man and I know you can get this lesson. Okay? We
But you
need
have
to
no.
deal with proportionality, not
Sure, I
just
agree.
hard numbers. 11 to 1 is hard numbers. But with the
Sure.
11 to 1, it should not be 11 to 1. It should be 11 to 0.0000001 because there are less a percentage of gays. There was a smaller percentage of gays. You should not be committing this much pedestry. You should not be
But
committing
you
this
haven't
much
demonstrated that
pedophilia.
they're doing that.
Why is such a small percentage of you committing so much of the pedophilia?
That's you haven't demonstrated
Proportionally,
that that's the case.
proportionally,
And so there you go.
disproportionately. That's the word for today,
It's not
ladies and gentlemen.
you haven't demonstrated that.
Disproportionate.
You've
That's
actually
the word of today.
demonstrated my point.
Okay. Thanks for having me on, Colton. It's been a blast. I hope this video stays up
Ah,
and so people
I
can
love it.
view the
This is
facts
hilarious.
and figure out
I love it.
the statistics on their own. And the truth of the
Sure.
matter is,
Sure.
you can try to discredit Cameron's work
Sure.
because he started in his hometown like we all did, but that's not going to do anything to discredit what the findings were. 11 to
So
1, that is an indictment, not a good
sure.
thing for you, for your
So
group or your
yeah,
cause.
so I'm not my goal here wasn't to discredit Cameron's work. I leave that up to actual researchers
Mhm,
like the like Dr. Gregory Herrick, the American Sociological Association, the
mhm,
Canadian Physiological sorry, it's the Canadian Psychological Association, and
mhm.
even the US District Court of Dallas, Texas. I'll leave that
Uh,
up to them to
You
tell
mean the
you
study of
to,
Canadian
to let
pedophiles that's shown that 30%
you know
have engaged in
what they
homosexual
think
acts? You mean that
Sorry. I
that
also
study?
forgot to mention the American Sociological Association, which will
Oh,
all let you know in
oh,
regards
the
to Cameron's
APA.
research.
Oh,
And
you
I
mean the
didn't say
ones
the
who have
APA.
changed, the
I
ones who have
didn't.
changed
I,
the designation of pedophilia now? They've
I,
now
I,
elevated it now to basically a behavior,
I
just like
didn't say the APA.
homosexuality.
I didn't say
They're
the
gonna.
APA.
Did you know they're changing the DSM right now as we speak?
I didn't say the APA.
Okay.
I never
All right.
mentioned the APA.
You mentioned Canadian pedophiles. Thirty
I
percent
didn't
of those
mention
studied
Canadian pedophiles
admitted
either.
to engaging in homosexual acts.
I didn't
Ninety-one
mention
percent of the
Canadian pedophiles.
molesters uh, admitted to.
Yeah, I'm done. Like, no, I just had to get rid of him. I'm done. Like, I just had to. I just had to. Like, I had to get rid of him. I did. Like, he can cry all he wants. He can cry all he wants, and he'll cut this part out or whatever. But he's just rambling at that point. He's not listening to me. I do apologize. That went longer than I thought it would be. What's going on, everybody? I do apologize, but they don't do a move. Bro, this was top tier content. You would I tried. Like, look, I had to get rid of him. I'm sorry. Like, it's just it's too damn. At that point, like, here's my thing: is that yeah, I was doing my best to be incredibly patient, letting him ramble and rant the entire time. And I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm a little too loud. You act like these are times when he does listen. Yeah, I did. That's a fair point. Look, I knew it would go that way. And the fact that I already know that this will be uh cut. Like he's going to heavily edit this part or misrepresent certain aspects, right? Um fuck, this went longer than I thought it would be. Fuck me. Uh so like absolutely people can hold me accountable for the things that I said. There are absolutely things that people can criticize me for, but at this point, you're giving a platform to get shot. Yeah, oh yeah, 100%. Excuse me. Yeah, he's going to, but yeah, look, there are absolutely, excuse me, criticisms that people can have about what I said here and the things that I presented and all that shit, right? But at the end of the day, I'm dealing with somebody who more so cares about you should have did him like I did Day. Like maybe, but I wanted to prove a point, right? Which is, yeah, I just wanted to prove a point that
Jill's
Does that
setting
make
people
sense?
up.
Of
Yeah.
course, I'm setting them up. All right, because they need to repent or die.
If you reject Christ, then the moment you take your first step through the gates of hell, the only thing you will hear is all of creation standing to its feet and applauding and praising God because God has rid the earth of you.
I take full responsibility for my going to hell.